For Telesur, I'm Regan Levines in Caracas. We start with this evening's headlines. Disgraced former Guatemalan President Perez Molina has been remanded into custody and will face fraud charges. The Mexican government looks to have been forced into reopening the investigation into the Ayotzinapa case after a damning report by independent investigators. And Venezuela offers to help alleviate Europe's refugee crisis. That and more right now on From the South. Thank you for being here with us. First up, a Guatemala judge has ordered fallen former President Perez Molina to stand trial over a corruption case, charging him with criminal association, taking bribes, and customs fraud. Perez Molina was forced to resign as president last week and has been remanded in custody until December 21st and refused house arrest. Judge Miguel Angel Galvez said there are sufficient indicators that he took part in a customs scam dubbed La Línea.
It's possible to establish at this time that there is sufficient rational evidence to presume on good grounds the participation of the accused party, Perez, in the events depicted by the prosecutor's office.
Guatemalan presidential candidate Jimmy Morales is still waiting to see who he will face in the second round of the presidential elections. Morales won the first round held on Sunday, and centre-left Sandra Torres leads rightist Manuel Baldizon by around 6,000 votes. But results would not be announced until all votes have been counted and recounted. However, Torres remains confident.
I'm convinced I will be the president of Guatemala.
We now go to Mexico, where after a damning report by the OAS's Human Rights Commission on the disappearance of the 43 Ayotzinapa students, the government has decided to reopen investigations into the case. Telesur's Clayton Khan filed this report.
The main conclusion made in the 500-page independent report that the 43 Ayotzinapa students were not incinerated in a garbage dump in Cocula, Guerrero, contradicting the official investigation, is of no surprise for many in the streets of the Mexican capital.
Many of us believed that all of this was manipulated. Well, not necessarily manipulated, but there were lines of inquiry that have not been investigated.
I think the entire chain of power needs to be investigated and they need to be punished. It doesn't matter what level they are.
Maybe they have them hidden somewhere and they apply so much investigation and spend so much money to cover up one lie with another.
While the demand of the families of the youth to investigate the role of the federal police and military in the forced disappearance of the students has been consistently denied by the authorities, the independent investigators affirmed that these security forces were involved.
According to documents in the official investigation through surveillance video, state and federal police, as well as the army, all had information on what was happening.
Meanwhile, the reaction by the federal government to the independent report has been cautious, reaffirming the position that the students were incinerated, but yet the authorities will re-examine forensic and scientific evidence and continue their investigation.
There will be a solicitation of a new forensic investigation through a collegiate team of forensic investigators of the highest prestige.
However, in a press conference by the families and classmates of the disappeared youth, the question into the motive of the crime circulates. Some analysts point to a missing bus used by the students and erased from the official investigation as key.
In one of the buses that were taken, there may have been a lot of heroin or opium that made the attackers block the road that exited Iguala. It is hard to explain the action in other way. It was too violent and too aggressive.
Finally, the families of the victims continue their demand for the return of the students, as well as a meeting with Mexico's President Enrique Peña Nieto and the permanent presence of the independent investigators until truth and justice is served. Clayton Khan, Telesur, Mexico City.
The People's National Movement, Trinidad and Tobago's oldest political party, has come out victorious in the Caribbean nation's recently concluded general elections. The geologist, Dr. Keith Rowley, will be the country's newest prime minister as his PNM party captured 23 constituencies for control of the 41-seat parliament in the oil-rich Twin Island nation. The incumbent ruling party, the People's Partnership, led by Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar, won 18 seats. Rowley is expected to be sworn in on Wednesday. Venezuela has said it will accept 20,000 Syrian refugees. The socialist leader's offer came as Europe struggles to cope with record numbers of asylum seekers escaping conflicts in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan.
Venezuela is going to accept 20,000 Syrian brothers who are in the diaspora. So I am announcing that we want 20,000 Syrians to come to our Venezuelan fatherland, to share this land of peace, of Christ, of independence hero Simón Bolívar, and to help with the development of this magical land.
And the presidents of Brazil and Chile also said that they would be willing to accept their share of refugees as the United Nations calls for more cohesive asylum policies to deal with the growing numbers flooding to Europe.
Brazil is a nation that was formed by many diverse peoples who live together here in peace, even in moments of crisis, as we are going through now. We will open our arms to take in refugees. I want to make the most of this opportunity today to reiterate the government's willingness to welcome those who were expelled from their countries, those who want to come to live, work, and contribute to the prosperity and peace in Brazil.
Venezuela has extended a partial border shutdown with Colombia to tackle gangs and the trafficking of subsidized goods from flour to gasoline. Local indigenous inhabitants are exempt from the measure, which Maduro said would make advances against crime, criminals, paramilitaries, and smugglers. There have been critics of Maduro's move, but he pointed out that Venezuela provides a home to over 5 million Colombians who have fled war and economic hardship in past decades. Uruguay and Argentina have offered to mediate between Venezuela and Colombia over the situation.
I have decided, after precise study, to erect a new border closure at Paraguachón in Zulia State to continue with the advancement of the liberation from Colombian crimes, paramilitaries, and contraband.
At the same time, President Maduro urged the Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos not to suggest applying neoliberal measures to Venezuela.
We are Chavez supporters, which means Bolivarians of the 21st century. I respect you. I never intended to paint you to be a Bolivarian, or revolutionary, or Chavez supporter. Don't you try to paint me as an Uribe supporter, as a neoliberal capitalist. It was too much for Chancellor Holguín to tell me, as the sovereign of this country, to take capitalist measures in my country, in our country.
Recomendándome a mí, como presidente soberano de este país, tomar medidas capitalistas neoliberales en mi país.
Heavy clashes broke out in Lota, Chile, with riot police using water cannons and tear gas to disperse crowds, who responded by throwing missiles at the officers. The unrest occurred when several dozen fishermen started blocking a road over a supposed unpaid bonus from the government. The benefit promised by the Chilean government compensated the fishermen for falling catch quotas for sardines and anchovies in an attempt to protect Chilean fish stock. The trial of the massacre of Curuhuati, Paraguay, due to be held Tuesday morning, has been suspended once again as the defense of the accused farmers filed a recusal against the judges. The massacre occurred in 2012 when 11 peasant farmers were killed, deaths that were never investigated, despite indications that at least 9 of the farmers were executed by police officers during the tragic eviction of landless farmers occupying private property in Curuhuati. This massacre prompted a chain of events resulting in the impeachment and removal of then-President Fernando Lugo, which neighboring countries described as a coup. A Mexican man has been arrested in the Galapagos Islands in Ecuador after he tried to smuggle 11 rare iguanas. Wildlife trafficking is on the world's most lucrative black market activities in the world, and the Galapagos Islands, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, are a hotspot for smugglers. The iguanas would have fetched up to $25,000 each, on the black market. 2 of the iguanas are being treated for stress. The detainee faces up to 3 years in prison in Ecuador. And coming up after the break, the family of Freddie Gray, who died while in police custody, will receive a $6.4 million payout from the city of Baltimore. The details up next.
Discover Latin America and the world in our programs. Telesur Reports, The Real USA, the stories behind the tweets, Ataman, Lives, Know Your Body, Open Files. Exposing the conflicts that affect our people, compelling personal stories, and the most controversial events. See it all on telesurtv.net in English. Telesur. Wherever the news, you'll be there. An insight into Africa today. With Bill Fletcher. The Global African, only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there. The truth behind the power. We lift the lid on some of the world's most ruthless figures. Open File, only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Almost 5 months after their 25-year-old son died after he sustained injuries while in police custody, the family of Freddie Gray has reached a settlement of over $6 million with the state of Baltimore. Gray's spine was injured at the back of a prison transport van on April 12th. He died a week later while in hospital. His death sparked days of protest action and riots and forced the United States to further the conversation on the treatment of minorities by white police officers. And gun violence in schools continues to cause a large debate in the U.S. 2014 was the school year with the most reported use of firearms in schools, and in 2015 an increase in police presence and metal detectors are key factors used for the safety of students and staff. Here is Telesur's Bianca Perez with more.
As another school year begins, the biggest worry for parents is the safety of their children due to the increase of gun violence in these institutions. The use of metal detectors, security guards, and police presence in schools have become regular tools used to have more control over the safety of the students.
It's much needed because, kids nowadays, they come to school because if they feel unsafe, they'll bring their own protection to school. So I feel like police are very necessary, and maybe an increase would help more.
Though some parents feel that increased security is an adequate way to keep their children safe, experts disagree, citing the negative effects of incrementing these measures.
Metal detectors won't solve the problem of gun violence in America. Metal detectors and extra security provisions which make the schools feel like jails, make the schools feel like fortresses, make the schools feel like militarized institutions rather than places for people to learn, that won't solve the problem.
The United States is the country in the world where residents own the most guns, making the accessibility of firearms a great portion of this large debate. For Becker, the issue stems as a societal problem.
And so we see American society is overrun with guns, overrun with weapons. The culture, the entertainment glorifies guns. And then you turn around to unemployed and poor kids in urban areas and say, yeah, but be sure you don't use guns, when in fact this society glorifies gun use.
In 2013, there were 28 reported shootings in school zones. In 2014, the number increased. During only the first half, local media reported 11 deadly shootings, leaving 2 dead and 15 wounded. Bianca Perez, Telesur, Washington, D.C.
The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Chief Antonio Guterres, believes that an end to the refugee crisis will come, but only when global wars and conflicts cease. Speaking at a press conference in Paris, Guterres reaffirmed that thousands of refugees arrive daily in European countries as they continue searching for better lives for themselves and their families, many of those escaping the effects of war and poverty. He added that if the European Union were more organized, the crisis would be manageable.
There are no reasons to be optimistic about forced displacement in the world. The Syria crisis is not the only one. It is, of course, the biggest one and the one that is closer to the European borders. But either the world increases its capacity to improve prevention and to more effectively solve conflicts, or I think that the refugee problem is going to go on increasing in the years to come.
The White House is reconsidering steps that the United States can take to help Europe deal with the refugee crisis. This comes after the UN said that at least 850,000 people are expected to cross the Mediterranean seeking refuge in Europe this year and next.
The situation is not new, and our effort to try to assist those countries that are bearing the brunt of the situation is not new. But it does appear that the situation is worsening, and that's why the United States is going to continue to consider additional steps that we can take to help those countries that are bearing the brunt of this burden right now.
After fresh talks between Ukraine's government and pro-Russian separatists led to the decision to end the ceasefire violations from yesterday, September 7th, no more than 24 hours later, 2 civilians were killed in a crossfire. The deaths come as the Ukraine set up groups of officers to combat illegal smuggling in eastern Ukraine. In response to the violence, the European Union has agreed to extend sanctions against those they believe are responsible for the attack. The sanctions will be extended by 6 months to March next year. Angry protesters marched to the United Nations headquarters in Gaza over the death of the 3rd victim of attacks by Israeli settlers. We've got Noor Harazi now on the ground with more.
The Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine organized Tuesday morning a massive protest at the United Nations headquarters in Gaza City in mourning of the 3rd victim of the Israeli terrorism, Riham Dawabsheh. Dozens of Palestinian political leaders as well as outraged ordinary people participated in the event. The protesters raised banners rejecting the practices of settlers against the Palestinian people in the West Bank and called on the Palestinian Authority to end all forms of security coordination with the Zionist state. Riham was announced dead Sunday overnight in an Israeli hospital due to the serious burns that she sustained when Israeli settlers set her home on fire last month. A huge funeral carried her body to rest in peace next to her son and husband, aimed calls for revenge.
The arson attack on the Dawabsheh family is such a terrible crime and it represents an image of the Israeli terrorism which occurs with the silence of the international community. This crime cannot just pass without response. We believe that the ideal response to this crime is ending the security coordination with the occupation which provides cover for the Israeli settlers to commit such crimes.
The sole survivor of the Dawabsheh family is 4-year-old Ahmed, currently receiving treatment at the hospital. He has been left alone to struggle in life and face his destiny. The tragedy occurred on July 31st when Israeli settlers set blaze to a home belonging to a Dawabsheh family in Douma village in the West Bank city of Nablus, killing 18-month-old Ali, who was shortly followed by his father Saad and recently his mother Riham. Noor Harazi, Telesu TV, Gaza.
In a move, quote, to show more mercy to people who are in difficult situations, Pope Francis has created a new document aimed at simplifying divorce proceedings. The document has been named the Motu Proprio and will replace the very complicated and costly procedure of getting a marriage annulled. Also, the Roman Catholic faith it is considered a sin to get a divorce from your first marriage, and the Vatican hopes to extend mercy to in those circumstances. The details of the new document will be released soon. And now we have a brief for you of other stories making headlines across the globe.
Scores of anti-government protesters have set up camp in Moldova's Great National Assembly Square demanding the resignation of the country's president over a $1 billion bank fraud scandal. The country's had protests since the month of April after missing money caused a rapid depreciation of the local currency and a fall in the standard of living. Political campaigning has begun in Myanmar just 2 months ahead of its first openly contested and historic general election in 25 years. Some 30 million people have the chance to vote, many for the first time in their lives. 2 people are now dead in Lebanon from respiratory-related problems in a massive sandstorm that passed through the region. The country's Minister of Health said most cases seen are about 750 are patients experiencing choking and shortness of breath. The US dentist who reportedly paid to kill the famous Cecil the Lion in Zimbabwe returned to work this week. His actions have sparked international outrage and Zimbabwe has unsuccessfully sought to have him extradited. In an interview with reporters, the dentist, Walter Palmer, said his actions were legal. The last batch of the French-produced snake antivenom 5-Oak will run out next June, and another batch will not be ready for 2 more years. This is a warning by the organisation Doctors Without Borders. Doctors say the absence of a safe and effective antivenom that is active against multiple toxins can translate into countless deaths.
The popular TV show Sábado Gigante, or Giant Saturday, after 53 years, will be coming off the air. This was revealed by the Univision network. The variety program was created and hosted by Chile-born Don Francisco since 1962 and is the longest-running TV variety show in history, according to Guinness World Records, that is. And as a farewell, its host, Francisco, now has a new New York street corner named after him. It's called the Don Francisco Boulevard. The Giant Saturday finale will air on September 19th.
After 53 years, I want to tell all of our viewers, thank you very much. This is an honor, to receive this corner here in Washington Heights with the name Don Francisco. I receive it with much modesty in the name of all the viewers and all of the people who worked on the program.
And Old Car Park in London, England is the site where a 50-piece symphony orchestra decided to experiment with space and sound. The group is called the Multi-Story Orchestra and the new space is called the Strawdatorium. It's called that because they created a circular space at the car park that was isolated using straw. And fans have been in awe of this space, the talents and the acoustics. This coming Sunday, the group will host its last performance of the season. They plan on performing Beethoven's Symphony No. 7. There is more on these and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English. From our news teams in Quito, Ecuador, and here in Caracas, Venezuela, for Telesur English, I'm Regan Devines. Have a great evening.